FanDuel has released their win totals for teams for the upcoming season. So, Aaron, who's too high? Who's too low?
Welcome back to First and Short, your first place to get short bits of college football news and analysis. It's hosted by myself, Aaron, and my co-host Mashfik. Welcome to the show. Before we get started, please subscribe. Mash, what platforms are we on again?
Man, listen, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. There's some other podcast stuff I've never even heard about, but when I press send, it goes to all of them. So whatever situation you got, we're on there.
Hey, please subscribe. Get us to our new goal. We're trying to get to 300 on YouTube. Please get us there. It's the off season. It's a little slow, but hey, we're consistent. We're giving you new content every week.
That's right.
All
At the end of the
right.
day, we just want to make sure that you sound like the smartest person at work when you're talking about football stuff, right? So we're trying to help you out, really.
Mm-hmm. It's good to know ball when it's time to know ball.
Exactly.
Anyway, yep, let's get into it. On the agenda for today, as Mash alluded to, we're going to talk about some teams' win totals, released by FanDuel on the upcoming season. We're going to talk about, who's too high and who's too low based on our opinions. And then after that, we're going to, talking a little bit about recruiting, seeing who's taking lead in recruiting for the 2027 season. And, we'll talk through the fastest risers in that 2027 recruiting class. Who has the most recruits and, who has a surprise name maybe in the top 5, right? With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the win totals. So, we looked at all the different teams that FanDuel provided on their, over under on how many wins they think they'll have for next year. And I'll go ahead and, get started with the SEC. There's some pretty interesting numbers here. So, at 9.5 wins, we have Texas and Georgia. 8.5, you got Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU. And then 7.5, I see Oklahoma and Ole Miss. And then at 6.5, I see Florida and Tennessee. I know we're missing some schools, but Mash, just from that list alone, who do you think, has a win total that's probably a little too high?
Too high? Honestly, I think Texas is a little too high. Sorry, Texas A&M is a little too high. I see that they have losses against, LSU. I think they're going to have a loss against at Alabama. They're going to go to LSU. They're going to go to Oklahoma and then Texas at the end of the year. That's 4 losses right there. So that gives them 8 wins. I don't know. And then I don't know if they've done enough to manage the issues that they had last year, especially around the quarterback and the. I mean, I think I saw something the last couple games he went like 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions or something near the end of the year. So I don't know if they've done enough to like help him with that. We'll see. But those 4 games right there, I think those have a high chance of being losses. And so for that, I think the A&M win total is a little too high.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
What about you? What team do you think is a little high for you?
Yeah, I'm going to the so-called cream of the crop up here. It's up top. I'm going to pick Texas. They're marked at, 9.5 wins. And I think it's the narrative is being written. The pressure is on for Texas. They got all the recruits, got all the high-powered NIL money. So they're expected to perform really high and maybe even win the SEC championship. But I think people are forgetting like how difficult an SEC schedule is, right? So they got to play at Tennessee. They got to play, the Red River rivalry again. They got to play Oklahoma. They have to play Ohio State. They host Ohio State this year, but it's still a very tough game. They're going to play Florida, which I'm excited to see what type of team Florida is going to be.
Yeah.
They go to LSU and then they go to Texas A&M. So that's, by far not an easy schedule. And you're telling me they're only going to drop, 2 games at most this whole season. I don't buy it. I think they're due for a better year than last year, but I don't know if I see them getting to that 10 or 11 win season.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Who did you think on this list that was a little too low?
Yeah, yeah. So low for me is gonna have to be Tennessee. They're sitting at 6.5 wins, right? I know they didn't have the year they won it last year, but I just can't see Tennessee not at least winning, 8 games, right? Like this
Yeah.
year, they have no UGA. So, as cursed as they are against that team, they don't got to worry about them this year.
Yeah.
They do have some notable opponents this year, but I think they're games that they can win. They're gonna go on the road and they're gonna play Georgia Tech. That'll be interesting. You might see me, myself and Mashfik there, so stay
Mhm.
tuned for that.
Mhm.
Um, they play Auburn, and I think they play Auburn at home. Auburn's still a team that has to figure out who they are, so I think you have a chance to steal a win while they're figuring out their character under a new coach and a whole new roster, pretty much. They host Alabama. I think that's always interesting. Whichever team is gonna host, the third week of October, I think they usually have the advantage. And then lastly, they're gonna go to Vanderbilt. I don't think Vanderbilt's gonna be the same team. Now that
No. Yeah.
they don't have their Heisman hopeful at quarterback anymore, and they have I think it's Jarrett Curtis, right?
You're right. Yeah. He might be
Freshman.
starting as a freshman, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so he has big shoes to fill, and playing in this SEC uh, field is not going to be easy as a first year starter. So yeah, that's what I have as my low. Who's your low? Who do you think we have marked too low as win
Yeah.
total?
Yeah. LSU was also at that 8.5 mark. And I think they'll get more than I think they'll get more than that. So the only uh loss well, so first of all, I made the prediction, or I think we both made the prediction. They're definitely losing that game to Ole Miss. Um, and I think that they end the season. Yeah, they end the regular season with Alabama, Texas, and at Tennessee. I think they're only going to lose one of those. I think they'll have enough mojo to get through that. But anyway, that's two losses. I think they're going to end the season with 10 wins. Lane Kiffin's first year there at LSU. So I'm only seeing two losses. I think that's a little low. At 8.5 for them. One team that I did that stuck out to me in terms of win totals, and I'll ask the same thing of you, Aaron, was at 7.5 mark. We got Oklahoma and Ole Miss there. Ole Miss with their first year as with Pete Golding. Obviously, he's been there before, but he's never had head coaching experience. I think they're going to get some surprise wins, but I don't know. Well, how do you feel about 7.5 wins for Ole Miss? Is that reasonable? I think they might be like I said, they might get that big win here and there, but I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to match the success that Lane Kiffin had.
Yeah, it's definitely going to put some ammo on their bulletin board to start spring ball, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that was this close to being in the college football playoff national championship last year, even without their head coach. So don't get me wrong, most of that season was, you know, contributed to Lane Kiffin, but I mean,
Sure,
I
that
think
champ is only going to get him so far, right?
yeah, yeah, he's only gonna get them so far, but I think they're a team that can still make noise. Don't get me wrong,
Nice.
the tough schedule, but that 7.5 is interesting, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Anything else worth noting before we move on to the Big Ten?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting with some of these teams have new coaches, new players. You never know who's really going to be that power team coming out of the SEC.
Yeah. It's been that
And
way for a
then
couple of years for sure.
yeah,
Cool. Sounds good. Let's go to the Big Ten then. So just some notables, just going from highest to lowest. At 10.5, we got Oregon and Indiana running, national defending national champ. 9.5, we got Ohio State, Penn State. Penn State was a surprising one. At 9.5 for me. 8.5, USC, Michigan, and then 6.5. Now we're getting into who knows, kind of the bottom of the barrel of the Big Ten. We got Wisconsin, UCLA, and then Nebraska after losing Dylan Raiola. Now they're at 5.5 total wins. So, Aaron, we'll start with you. You start with your high or your low. Who do you think is misplaced on this list?
Yeah, I'll start with my low. So at 6.5 wins, you got USC. I mean, not USC, UCLA, right? I feel like that's very low for them. They have no Indiana, no Ohio State this year, and they'll have a more veteran, more seasoned quarterback in Nico. So I think, last year they had the ups and downs, but I think they'll find their rhythm this year. They'll win the games they're supposed to win and make, those big games a little bit more interesting. And I think they can maybe get 8.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds
So
good. Uh,
who's your low?
yeah, I'll start with my low. I think USC is a little too low, so they're at 8.5.
Mhm.
The only guaranteed losses on here, guaranteed by myself, yeah, I think is Ohio State and at Indiana. So that's 2 losses. So that's a max of 10 wins. Even if they lose another one to, let's say, Oregon or something, that's 9 wins. That gets them over 8.5, right? So, uh, I think that they could beat Oregon. Um, or at least that's up in the air. I don't know, but I think the Ohio State and at Indiana are definite losses. But anyway, that's 9 wins by my book. So I think that they're listed a little bit too low.
Yeah.
Um, I'll start with I'll continue with who's too high. Oregon, right at the top of the list. I know Dante Moore is another year older. But he's losing a lot of weapons, and and it feels like Dan Lanning always loses the big one, and they've got a lot of big ones next year. And they don't have a lot of room for error here. 10.5. That means you have to get 11 wins. Um, I They have to go to USC. They have to go to Ohio State. They're I That looks like I think they're going to lose both of those, and so that already brings them down to 10. So yeah, Oregon's just in a precarious position. I think 10.5 is a little just too high. Um, Indiana's also there. That was going to be my choice, but that was everybody's choice last year for being too high, and everybody was wrong. But I don't want to be wrong again, so I'll leave Indiana alone. But I think Oregon is a little too high at 10.5.
Fair, fair, fair. So
What do you
my
think?
high for the Big Ten is going to be Ohio State at 9.5 wins. Um, may sound shocking, based on their past history for a while. They've been able to easily get, the 10-win, 11-win seasons, right? But this year their schedule's tough. They got to go to
Tough, yeah.
Texas, they go to Iowa, they go to Oregon, they go to USC, they go to Nebraska, and then they got to play Michigan at the end of the year. I
Yeah.
honestly, Ohio State will get nothing but my respect if they get above, 10 or 11 wins this season with that schedule. I think they're finally, fans across all of college football are going to finally see, Ohio State have a really tough schedule, and they'll have the chance on the other end to prove that this isn't just because this isn't the SEC doesn't mean this isn't
Quality
a
football
tough
program.
league.
Yeah,
Yeah,
tough
exactly.
league. Yeah, that too. I was gonna say, I mean, those teams that you mentioned are um, difficult teams to play against for sure. But think about the travel that you're having to do to Texas, to Iowa's not too far, but Oregon, like LA, to Nebraska. Like these are long road trips, right? And that adds up on the body for sure.
Yep. Definitely has this wear and tear. Yep. Any last thoughts before we move on to our next conference match?
I thought the 5.5 for Nebraska was a little interesting. Granted, yeah, they don't have their quarterback who's been starting the last couple years, so it's kind of like a reset for them.
Mhm.
But we've seen what Matt Rule is able to do. I don't even like his backup quarterback, whoever that's going to be. It seems a little low. But I don't know enough about what's going on there to really comment on it.
Mhm.
A lot smarter minds work in Vegas. I'm sure they know something that I don't. For them to put the win total at 5.5, but it just seemed a little off to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. Okay. Well, if we look at, our next conference, the ACC, the spectrum of win and win totals per team is kind of crazy. You got, on the high end, Notre Dame, even though they're an independent school, they're at 11.5 wins. And it's due to that, cake schedule that they have. And then on the lower end,
That
you know, you
schedule is kind of silly.
yeah, it's absurd. On the lower end of that, right, you got teams like North Carolina and Syracuse who are at 4.5 wins. So it's the Wild West, and you got all these different teams in between. Just from the list, Mash, what do you see that catches your eyes, and who do you think has a win total for next year that's just way too low?
Yeah, too low. Okay, I thought Georgia Tech was too low. I understand Haynes King is gone. He was the offense. He was the heartbeat of that team. But you know, uh, they got the Mendoza brother, right? They got him. They got Brent Keys, who's gonna make sure that that team is on point. I think the guarantee, well, maybe not the guaranteed losses, but the losses that I think we'll see. Um, so at 6.5, they have to lose. Uh, or sorry, I'm looking for 5 losses. Uh, Tennessee at Virginia Tech, Louisville at UGA. Right, those are only 4 losses. Clemson, I don't know. They're kind of a we don't know. We don't know what we're going to get out of Clemson, but that's only 4 losses, so that gets them to 8 wins. Um, so I think that 6.5 is a little too low. Everybody else on their schedule seems very manageable, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's my thought there.
Okay. Nice, nice. So my choice for, somebody whose win total is probably too low for next year, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I think Syracuse is too low at 4.5. I know Fran Brown, he had his sophomore slump his second season at Syracuse last year, but I think I believe in him and what he's trying to do for the program. He comes from a good program of being an assistant coach and learning under Kirby Smart. Um, and again, the ACC. I don't think there's a powerhouse for sure. I don't think it's too top heavy. I think
Yeah.
it's a little bit of the Wild West to where he can get some wins and sneak and at least get to 500 is what my estimate is.
Okay. Yeah,
Mm,
that sounds reasonable. Who do
mhm.
you think is too high on this list?
Too high. Um, so I'm gonna have to go with NC State here. 6.5 wins is their line. It's not a terrible line. I just think they're too high because of their retention, right? They always have guys who just, shout out to the program. They produce some stars. Um, you
They
know,
find the
it,
stars.
they find the stars, right? Casey Concepcion, great athlete, went to Texas A&M last year. He originally was at NC State first, and then of course at Texas, you're going to see Hollywood Smothers a lot in the backfield this year. He was a running back who lit up the backfield this year at NC State. So they just can't seem to keep these star players that they put on the map of different programs across the country that now have access to NIL and getting your player to transfer the very next
Hmm.
season, right? Along with that, they're going to play schools like Duke, Vanderbilt. They're going to play Syracuse, which I think, Syracuse is going to be a wild card team this year that can win some games. They got to go to Florida State and they got to play Virginia. I just don't see this team being able to, with how bad it is for them to not keep players in their program like that for longer than a year or two to find a way to win 7 or 8 games. So that's why I think it's too high.
Hmm.
Who's your choice?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Cal here. We saw Sangha Palatule last year. He started kind of hot. He kind of plateaued, I would say, yeah, for most of the season. But hopefully, we see an improvement from his end. He's a player that I'm excited to see. I think he has so much potential. But in any case, last year they're listed at 7.5 wins for the year. They went 7-5 last year, so this would have went under last year. But still, they got Clemson on their schedule, which they didn't have last year. They have at SMU. They didn't have SMU last year. They have to play at NC State, at Virginia. These are very long away games, and then to end the year, they have UCLA and Pitt. They didn't play UCLA or Pitt last year, and I think they'll probably lose one or two of those, one or two of those games. They didn't play a Pitt. We know they're not trying to lose any ACC games, right? They don't care about anything else on their schedule, especially near the end of the year. They're trying to win all their ACC games. Nico, like
Mhm.
you said, he's a veteran quarterback. I don't see them getting past that, but that's already one, two, three, four. That's 5 or 6 losses right there. So I think they're just slightly too high at that 7.5 level. Um, I did want to call out like for the ACC plus Notre Dame, we're putting them together. It seemed like an easy bet to choose Notre Dame or Miami, but like you said, Notre Dame has a pretty easy schedule. Miami is going to do Miami things. That we'll probably definitely see them back in the college football playoff again. Those teams have very, very reasonable, doable schedules. I don't think we'll see too many losses for either. They do play each other again next year, so one of them will have a loss. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if both of those teams have one loss put together by the end of the regular season.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Big 12 real quick. I know you mentioned that you think the ACC is the Wild West. I think Big 12 will forever be the Wild West. I could not find I could not find a team that I felt like was ranked too high here, rated too high here. 11 and a half wins. We've got Texas Tech. Then it already jumps down to 8.5. Like no one Vegas does not want to put money on anybody at 10.5, 9.5. BYU's at 8.5 alongside Utah. 7.5 is Kansas State. 6.5, we got Arizona State. Blah blah blah. A few other teams. Colorado bottoms out the league at 4.5 wins. So Aaron, if you want to start, what team on this list do you feel like was what had a win total that was a little too high?
Gonna go with your top driver, Texas Tech. Like you said, it's the Wild West. Texas Tech had a great year last year. They did a great job in NIL recruiting to, clean up their weak points and maybe even maintain the level of play. I'm just gonna bank on them not being able to replicate a perfect regular season. That's that I think they're gonna have one or two slips during the regular season.
Yeah,
Still think they'll have a great year, and we may see them in the college football playoffs again. But yeah, I just don't have them as well. What about you?
yeah. That's a good choice because and since you took it, I'm gonna have to choose someone else. In which case,
Mhm.
I don't know who to choose, so I'm gonna choose Kansas State. They're at 7.5 wins, and I think that's too high just because I don't think Avery Johnson is too good, and he is
Mhm.
basically the whole offense. There's a lot of teams like that where the quarterback is the whole offense, but a lot of times those teams are good, or like the quarterback is good, but Avery Johnson can't do anything, and so I think Kansas State won't be able to get that 7.5. I think they went 7-5 last year. I forgot to write it down, so I think that's who's too high. Um, I think if I can go ahead and just do who's too low, I think Oklahoma State is too low. They're at 6.5. And the reason I say that is because just like Penn State, they're basically a brand new team. Like they're volume wise, they're bringing in 30 plus players, just like Penn State is, just like Virginia Tech is. Um, and my thing is, if Penn State can be at 9.5 with a whole new roster, so can Oklahoma State.
Mm.
That's my logic, and that's what I'm sticking
Fair,
to. What about you?
fair,
What do you
fair.
think?
So for my team that's too low, I'm gonna have to go with BYU. One, don't count out Bear. Bear Bockenmeyer proved to be the guy as a freshman this year for that team, and I think he's gonna come in even stronger, work even harder, and lead that team. And then their schedule, it's got some good games, but I don't think it's too tough.
So
Of
so
course,
they're so they're at so they're at 8.5,
yep,
right? Yeah. So
about eight
who
and
do you
a half.
think? Yeah, who are the teams you think they'll definitely beat or yeah
So they have Colorado State. They got some in conference games like Arizona. I think they play Iowa State. The games that I'm worried about that may bring them close to this line is going to be going to Utah, right? Playing Baylor. They'll beat Colorado State, I think, on the road. And then lastly, if I haven't mentioned it already, they go play Central Florida. So that'll be an interesting game, interesting dynamic. But I feel like they'll be a team that'll be right there competing for the Big 12 championship again.
Gotcha. Do they play Notre Dame?
They do play Notre Dame, so
Oh,
that's gonna
okay.
be
Yeah.
yeah, another interesting
What
one,
is that?
yeah.
The Catholics versus the Mormons. That'll be a good one.
Yep, yep,
Gotcha.
yep, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, yeah,
Alrighty.
that kinda yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. Well, that wraps up that, that topic of, win totals and who we think, might have been rated, too high and too low. But let's talk about some recruiting, right? Uh Based on the current 24/7 sports team rankings for the class of 2027, there has been some, significant movement over the last couple of weeks as programs begin to solidify, their early foundations. Um, we'll start with our, biggest riser or the big leaper that we noticed on this list, and that's going to be the
The hot
USC
team at the
Trojans.
moment.
Yeah, the hot team. It's going to be the USC Trojans. They've been the biggest riser on the board lately. They recently surged into the top 10 on some of the industry boards that we've been viewing, following the commitment of athlete honor for Alave Johnson. Big pickup for them, and I think the connection is Lincoln Riley. He's betting on elite speed to fix his roster. USC's 2027 class currently has a high or a higher average player rating than Oklahoma or Ohio State. They aren't just taking recruits or taking anybody who wants to go to the school. They're aiming for those blue chips.
Gotcha. What do you think, like, in terms of, issues that they had from last year? What issues are do you think Lincoln Riley is trying to address in the recruiting class that he's building now?
Yeah. They're trying to get rid of that soft reputation. So despite moving to the Big Ten, USC still kind of struggle with their interior physicality. In 2025, they were often bullied in the second half of games by those more power run teams like a Michigan or a Penn State, uh, leading to a defense that really couldn't get off the field when they need to. So I think their focus, has definitely been more geared towards, that interior defensive line and that local identity. So Lincoln Riley and his defensive coordinator, D'Anton Lynn, they're hyper focused on finding those big bodies that can be, known as power four Big Ten bodies, right? They already have a 2027 class that features, Isaiah Vandermeid. He's a massive, kind of local guy, defensive line, and they're trending to, maybe pick up some more elite prospects, some 5 stars like, Marcus Facato.
Gotcha. Okay,
Mhm.
cool. So yeah, they are definitely the fastest riser, the USC Trojans. I want to focus on, I think, the number one. I'm looking at 24/7 right now. The number one team, not just in quality but also in quantity. They're also the volume leader in terms of how many commits they have total. Um, they definitely pulled away. They've been sitting near the top for a while. They definitely pulled away recently. Now they have 19 commitments. No other team in the top 20 has more than 10. So Oklahoma has doubled their efforts, doubled the number, doubled the volume of any other elite program right now. They're effectively just like speed running through the 2027 cycle to build that massive buffer before summer camp starts.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think they're trying to address some stuff from last year, right? I think attrition was probably the biggest thing. Um, their first couple years in the SEC, it exposed a lot of depth or lack of depth, excuse me. Um, you know, by like November of last year, we remember seeing Oklahoma Sooners games where they just looked exhausted. They couldn't get off the field. Linebackers, that core of linebackers, they lack the size to match a lot of the SEC power backs. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what they're trying to accomplish with this
Mhm.
new recruiting class, and they're doing that by just having the bodies ready to go. I
Yep.
think one of the main crown jewels of this class is going to be Cooper Witten, 5-star linebacker, and he's the son of Jason Witten. And yeah, I mentioned their speed running through this they're speed running through this 2027 cycle because they're trying to build a roster that's so deep that injuries just don't derail their season like we've seen. They're targeting a lot of multi-sport, athletes, multi-sport freaks, players with elite track times or basketball backgrounds, baseball backgrounds. They're trying to really bring back an identity of like a speedy, athletic defense here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair, fair, fair. So what is I mean, they were pretty much sitting at the top of recruiting for 2027, and now they're pulling away. What are they doing different this year? Like, I don't understand. It's crazy to see.
Yeah, I think Brent Venables, he's adopting, maybe he's taking this ownership onto himself, but he's really adopting a front office type of style where he's just going after folks. He's just going after those numbers. He he's doing it in a way that no other team can do it. I don't know what his criteria is, but shout out to Brent for figuring out where they were lacking. Like I said, they did not have good depth, right? And they were missing certain people like they didn't have a running game. So he is taking that ownership onto himself by just putting bodies towards those problems. I'm sure
Mhm.
during spring practice right now, throughout the summer and fall camp, they'll figure it out in terms of depth chart and who needs to go where, and if anybody needs to make swaps in positions. But he's not going to let the number of like a lack of players there be the reason why he can't figure that out.
Fair, 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 fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to our next team on the list. I'm gonna call them the blue chip climber. That's gonna be the Texas A&M Aggies, right? So they moved up to the number 2 spot nationally. So right there behind OU. They've been, incredibly efficient. They've landed a total of 9 4-star prospects already in this class. Um, Coach, Mike Elko, he's winning the, battle of the stars. Despite having, 9 fewer commits in Oklahoma, the Aggies' average player rating is 92, so that's one of the highest in the country. They're focusing on elite defensive talent, especially in the secondary with guys like Kamari Dorsey and Jaquan Snell, right?
Mhm.
Um,
I feel like A&M last year was very senior heavy, like yeah, senior heavy, older guys, but still like a little skill deficient. So do you think like that's the thing that they're trying to solve for this recruiting class?
yeah, yeah. So you're absolutely right. It feels like they were that veteran led team, but they lacked those explosive outside playmakers. So, when they fell behind in the college football playoffs last year against Miami, they didn't have anybody that could really be that home run threat when they needed. So yeah, I think their recruiting focus based off of the that player rating average. They're focusing on not only quality but quantity as well, having that balance, right? Um, Mike Oko, he's facing kind of a massive roster reset. Um, 21 players are out of eligibility after 2025. So his specific focus is going to be, getting those outside guys, those big body receivers and big body linebackers. Unlike 2025, where they took, smaller, twitchier guys, 2026 and 2027 are filled with wide receivers over 6 foot, like Aaron Gregory, Jaden Warren. And these are guys that are going to give, quarterback Marshall Reed a large margin of error when pinpointing where he needs to throw to his targets, right?
Mhm.
Um, Elko, plain and simple, is building a wall. He's focused on high school O linemen as well and linebackers like Storm Miller to ensure, the defense stays elite even after, veteran starters depart. So
Yeah,
he's
nice.
doing a
You
great
mentioned
job.
Yeah, you mentioned quality and quantity. I just realized Oklahoma and A&M are the only two schools with double digit commits right now for the 27 class. So quantity is definitely a focus there for Mike Elko and Brent
Mhm.
Venables. Let's move into the last team that we want to talk about recruiting wise. This team might surprise you because they're in the top five. Not a typical name that we typically see. So it's Washington, the Washington Huskies. They're sitting at number 5 right now, and their their ranking is built on, you know, grinding. I guess they have 9 commits. 8 of them are 3 stars. So Jed Fish, you know, he's trying to find diamonds in the rough. While they do currently lacking the 5 star flash that the teams above them have, 4 or 5 stars. They have outworked programs like Georgia and Alabama, um, typical teams you see in the top five, you know, early in this cycle to stay in that national top five. Whether they finish in the top five or not, still being there adds some firepower to your brand, to your name. You know, some recruits are going to look at Washington just because of the position that they're in currently. Um, yeah. D- uh, What so in 2025, I feel like they're still trying to figure out their identity crisis, right? Or they're having identity crisis. They're trying to figure out what their identity is. They had a
Mhm.
coaching change from DeBoer to Jed Fish, you know, a couple years ago. Um, I think last year was all about trying to, you know, stay. They're still trying to stabilize that ship. They one of their biggest issues is lack of like top end blue chip talent in the secondary, and it's led to a pass defense that's been pretty susceptible to the Big Ten's like elite vertical threats. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yep. So I see they're trying to get that top end talent. Um, find those guys that can be big time stars for them. Um, do you know like how involved they are in the NIL portal at all?
yeah, you would think that they would be,
Yeah.
right? But Jetfish, he's publicly stated that he doesn't want to buy into building through the portal. He wants to emphasize high school development, which is, I mean, I commend, but we've seen it set some programs back, like Clemson, for example. Stray
Hmm.
bullet there. Sorry about that. But his focus, you know, especially in this high school thing, recruiting, it's definitely been focused on defensive backs and quarterback continuity. They're heavily pursuing like legacies and elite DBs like Josiah Molden to fix a secondary that felt like a patchwork unit. I would say last year in 2025. I think Washington and Jetfish, they're selling like a pro model, right? He's recruiting kids who want an NFL style system. He wants quarterbacks and DBs who can excel in high IQ, complex schemes, things of that nature. He wants smart people to come in, play smart football, and be ready for the next stage. So that's kind of what their focus is. Best of luck to them. I don't know how far they'll get with, you know, if they're gonna have to land a couple more 4 stars, maybe at least one 5 star. Right now, the quantity is what's keeping them in the top five. So we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the cycle.
Okay. Yep. Fair. Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. All right, guys. So, kind of a lengthy episode today, but a lot of good information, a lot of good content. If you could, please go down in the comments and talk about what team you think has too high or too low of a win total for next season. It's live on FanDuel. It's live on the article that we saw in 24/7 Sports. Let us know if you think a team is just not going to win this many games, or they should definitely win this amount of games. With that being said, thank you for watching First and Short. We'll see you next time.
You